Welcome to the Commercial Edge podcast with me, Chris Webber. Come and enjoy a virtual coffee while I share my experience and ideas that could help you overcome difficult people at work. I share my thinking and insights so that you can find new ways to overcome challenges and gain a commercial edge and unleash the power of people. I'm really pleased to have Jose Aguilar join me live from Germany. He's become a real part of the Foxley family. I've worked with Jose a number of times over the last few years, and it's a real pleasure to bring him into the podcast. He's a guy who has tons of experience working in markets all around the world, and I'm really pleased to get his view on difficult people, difficult customers, and share some of the stories of his experiences through the world. So welcome to the podcast, Jose.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm very happy to be with you again.
Jose, tell us a bit about who you are, what you do, and what you've become known for in your career. I think that to me is the big thing. Like, what's the Jose brand about?
Well, thank you. Yes. Well, I can tell you that my career is basically based in healthcare for the last 20, 25 years. It has been a journey across borders, industries, cultures. I have lived and worked in 4 countries, in Mexico, in Colombia, in Russia, now in Germany, as you rightly said. I believe that gave me some deep appreciation of the nuances of the global business and the power of different perspectives and how to drive innovation and growth and how to treat different kind of people. So over the last 20 years, I've been in pharmaceuticals, diagnostics, medical devices. So I've been working from launching products, dealing with sales in all of these countries. And I mean, usually I'm very excited in getting to know new people, new businesses, and new cultures for sure.
So let's talk about culture. It comes up a lot in work, and I think the more globalized we become, the more we see engagement, culture clashes and cultural conversations and misunderstandings. How has your experience been of working across cultures? Have you found it smooth? Have you been able to adapt quickly, or did you find it a challenge?
I think when you start working around the world, you start dealing with these cultural, I wouldn't say challenges, but at least differences, right? So I think it's not the same when you just work with different people with different cultures while staying at home and working in the same in your same country than when you really move abroad and work and live in a different culture. So to me, when I first moved, it was a huge cultural impact because I went to Moscow, right? From Mexico City to Moscow. So you can imagine that was a big change culturally. So I was living in a hotel, so that was really helping because I was living in this American chain, so everything was in English and so on. Nevertheless, I was working in the Moscow office, and of course, working and interacting with people from a different culture and a strong culture like the Russian culture. I would say it was a little bit challenging at the beginning, but it turned out to be a very good experience to start my career abroad in Russia because this strong cultural background that people in Russia has, it really helped me to better understand how to work in a different environment.
So you think it was easier that it was a very, very different culture, that it was, it's almost the complete opposite in many ways of Mexico, having spent a couple of weeks in Mexico City. Moscow is cold. It's, the culture is much less outgoing. It's a much more conservative kind of personality group of people, much, very direct in ways of doing business. Did it help you that it was so different that you knew you had to completely change? Or did you think that it was just so different that it became every day was a challenge?
I mean, at the beginning, I didn't really know what I was getting into, to be very honest. I remember having a call from my former boss asking me whether I would be keen to hear an opportunity in Moscow. And I say yes, but I never thought I was going to get it, to be very honest. Fast forward after the conversation with the GM back then in Russia, she said, "Oh, by the way, we need you here. And yes, I want you to be the guy. And see you in 1 month." So I was like, I really didn't have the chance to really think about the cultural nuances and everything that I was going to be facing. I was more concerned back then to explain my wife that I just said yes to come to Moscow.
Yeah, talking about difficult people in our lives, difficult people at work.
Conversations. I
Yes.
difficult conversations. But what I can tell you is when I landed there and I started going to the office, yes, it was very challenging. I have to say it was not a very easy kind of conversation joining there. I was having the fertility business back then, I remember, in the country. And it was a little bit shocking for my team in Russia also, like, oh, now we have this Mexican guy coming and having the business, was something probably they were not expecting. And but it turned out to be less challenging, the working environment, than the living environment. And I think that's also very enlightening. Sometimes you think about Russia and Latin America like a very different countries, but when you talk about how business works and how things move around in the office with customers, with even with authorities, is not that different as you would imagine, right? Now, on the personal side, then I can tell you there's a huge difference between a Latin American culture and the Russian culture.
And that's really interesting because I guess we have expectations of how business is done. And I worked for a number of different companies through my career, and many of them did, on the face of things, very similar things. So they sold similar products in similar marketplaces. But culture of the organizations were very different, even though in theory they were, based in the UK or based in Europe and based around doing the same thing. I noticed cultural differences that I needed to adapt to. And at times they felt good and it was comfortable. And at times it felt very uncomfortable. And I guess we underestimate even those cultural differences. And you're just your reference there to saying, well, the business life wasn't that different. Was that because you worked in the same country, same company, and you just moved from one market to the next?
I guess so because I was working for the same company. That is true, and the cultural environment of the company, pretty much all around the world, it was not that different. Of course, you in the end, you are dealing with people. They have their own ways of managing things and so on. But in the end, yes, you work for the same company, and there's some cultural impact of working for the same company all over the world. So that really helped, I have to say. Also, I was dealing with a lot of people outside of the country as part of my job. Also, my boss was sitting in Dubai back then. I was interacting with the region of back then Intercontinental, which was countries not necessarily more Western style, but more like Middle East mindsets and mentalities. So in the end, this strong cultural background from the company really helped me adapt, and also really helped me not to feel so out of place, if I may use the expression.
Yeah, that's interesting. And so I'm curious, what is more difficult? The very different expectations of working, moving from Mexico to Russia, or moving from Mexico to Germany, I suppose, or working in Colombia. Because I'm just very aware that from Europe, from a European perspective, we have this region called LATAM, and we say, it's the LATAM region, and that includes everything from, Mexico down to the tip of Argentina. And I'm sure that it's not the same. What's your experience of that, and how would you engage people in understanding how to work more effectively with this huge geography and huge cultural differences, I imagine?
Yeah, I mean, Colombia was like feeling at home, to be very honest. One of the things that you clearly identified, I mean, you have been in Latin America probably a couple of times as well. You just came back from Mexico. When you talk to people from Mexico, from Colombia, from Argentina, or even from Brazil, which is a different language, you don't see that huge differences culturally that you see in many other regions around the world. And
Mm.
despite Latin America being such a huge geographical extension, I mean, you from one place to another one, you really need to take some time, and sometimes are really, really long flights. But culturally, we are very much the same. So when I moved to Colombia, I think it was like feeling at home, talking to people, hanging out with people outside the office, inside the office. It was more or less the same. To be very frank, there are certain particularities on the Colombian culture that may differ a little bit from Mexico, but not something that I would say I cannot adapt. So to me and
Mm.
to my family, because of course I'm always moving together with my family to all these places, it was like, coming back home, talking to the same kind of people, the same language, more or less the same. I mean, impossible to have the same food as in Mexico, but but more or less the same. I mean, kind of getting together, sharing some time on the table by eating something nice, things like that that are very Latin oriented.
Mm.
Everything happening around the table and eating. So that was kind of an easy adaptation for me when I was in Colombia, to be frank.
Okay. So what you seem to have a skill, which is to be able to adapt to different cultures, to work with people across borders, base yourself in one market, work with people in a different market. I do think that's a skill. Do you think it's a skill? And if so, how do you think you've developed this skill? Because I'm sure lots of people struggle with this issue.
Uh, I mean, now I know it's a skill. I mean, it is a skill. I would not downplay it because I think yes, adapting to different cultures, different countries, and different pretty much everything. It is definitely a skill. I keep telling this to my kids as well, and I think it shouldn't be downplayed at all. But I don't really think about it. So, well, I didn't think about it when I was doing it. I
Mm.
believe I do have the adaptation kind of mindset because I think it's a mindset. You need to
Mm.
think about being comfortable outside of the normal ways of doing things. And the normal ways of doing things is staying at home, close to your people, close to your friends, your family, things you know. And going to the unknown is what normally creates this anxiety of not feeling in place, to put it like that. In my view, I never really thought about it until now, how important was the skill of quickly adaptation. But now I
Mm.
can tell you, if I would need to advise anyone starting their career, I will always say yes to whatever opportunity do you get of getting out of your comfort zone. And it doesn't need to be going from Mexico to Russia, of course, but it could also be uh, I mean, as you describe in your book, moving to another territory, right, in the same country
Mm.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
it's challenging. You need to be out of your comfort zone in order to grow, to learn, and also to start building this, as you call it, skill of adaptation or resilience. The only way to build it is by training that
Hmm.
skill, and I think you train it by getting out of your comfort zone. That's the only way to train something. You need to put it to stress, and that's how it worked out for me, at least.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think it's very stark when you hear stories like yours of moving across the world, almost to the other side of the world, and settling into a completely new culture. Um, Growing up, I grew up in the north of England, and the idea of moving to the southeast to London was a completely different culture. And people who moved to London, we used to listen to them, wow, they moved to London. Can you imagine? And it's 200 miles, it's nothing in the context, you're just talking about the size of Latin America. And yet, as a child, I remember the idea of moving to the southeast. My dad was offered a job at one point down in London, and we discussed as a family whether we would take the leap to move that far down, and we didn't. And my parents were born. Well, my dad was born abroad, but they spent all of their lives in the same town. They lived there for 80 years and haven't moved. And it's interesting that the experience your family has of moving in different cultures, I think, is certainly very, very different to the experience I have. And I do think it's an advantage that your children have now in terms of their ability to connect with people globally, to overcome these cultural differences and cultural challenges.
I mean, I agree. I mean, do you know where do you see it? I see my children, of course, changing countries and so on, but you also change them from schools. And this is a major change for especially for children at that young age, moving from one school to the other one and leaving friends behind. I think this is really challenging. I mean, if it's challenging for us as adults, imagine for children.
Yeah.
And I see now, living in Germany now for 7 years, my son has been attending 3 different schools because of the age. I mean, they need to change school and so on. And I'm always kind of concerned what would happen now, right? With the new change, with the new school. And I can see that for him now, it's a very easy adaptation. And I think this is coming out of the experience he has got by moving from country to country and so on. So for him, it's not like a big thing now to find new friends or get to know the new school and so on. So, I mean, you were just talking about this being a skill, and I think we are now, as parents, embedding that to our children, the skill of adaptation and resilience that comes innate just by needing to change from one place to another one.
Yeah. Imagine his capability of networking as he grows up, because he walks into a room of unfamiliar faces, every few years or maybe even a few months, and has to start again with these relationships. And that's the challenge at work. It's a challenge in sales to meet new customers and build relationships quickly. It's a challenge within business to connect with clients and across functions and work with different people from different parts of the world. And as we become more integrated, your son has a massive advantage over someone who has spent all of their time very carefully curating their friends and being very cautious about where they go and where they live.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it's not only that, it's also the language barriers, right? Because yes, I mean, his mother tongue is Spanish, but he has been speaking in English pretty much all his life. And now he speaks German in school. And so it's already hard to build a network and making some friends in your own language. Now, let alone doing that in a different language and still try to keep up with your friends and even with the slang, right? of the children here. And it also happens at work, by the way. And this is a very good example to segue the discussion towards the working environment. Sometimes building a network at work is as important as in life, right? I mean, the people, the contacts, and the better the network you have within your own company, it really helps out for your performance out there. So you really need to know the right people in the right places to help you out driving your own performance. And you also need to know who are going to be the ones that are going to make your life difficult sometimes. Same happens in school, same happens in the workplace.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And I think that is you're absolutely right. It's a massive skill. And I think the value that our generation brings to to business is networking, is this ability to network. I'm very lucky that I'm a native English speaker, but the power that you guys have as English speakers to suddenly open up places to work. You can work across LATAM, you can work across most of Europe. Speaking German, your son will have whole loads of opportunities that are incredibly powerful to connect with people and build these networks and relationships. And success is all about the network. To me, it's who you know, how you can build trust, how you can overcome difficulty, and how you can overcome conflict. And I'm curious, I want to ask you a question about your experiences of working over the last 25, 30 years in terms of standout moments where you found really difficult people or difficult challenges, perhaps culturally or perhaps for other reasons. And I'd love to hear your memory of who those were and what happened.
Yeah, I mean, I have very good examples in for I would call them difficult people per se because of their way of being, but also probably because of the role they were playing. And I will give you two examples. I remember one very good example back in Mexico City when I was leading one of the business there. And I had this guy in my team. He was really good salesperson. He was the sales manager back then. He was really good, lots of experience in the therapeutic area, very good connections. People love him very much. Customers, even his team, but he was probably not the right person anymore. And this is a really challenging one, right? Because then you have someone that is or used to be a really good person for the job, but the job evolved way more than his own skills. And he was in, let's put it like this, the so-called friend zone. So we have this friend zone when you're dating, when you're a young kid. You don't want to get into the friend zone, right? Because you like the girl and you don't want to be friends. You want to be something more than friends. Yes. And you know that if you fall into the friend zone, you are done, right? That's not going to progress. And I started going out with him and his team and so on. And then I realized that he was being friend zoned by everyone, which is not necessarily wrong. But the problem is that sometimes you need to make the hard decisions, or even having very strong conversations with customers, or even you need to push them to say yes and you don't want them to say no. And when you're in a friend zone, it's so easy for a client to say no to you because, I mean, in their mindset is, I mean, this guy is my friend. I can, of course, be very open and say no and then don't buy from him, and I will still be friends of him. And same was with the people that he was leading, right? I mean, they were, of course, liking him very much, but to the point that some of them, they were not doing what they need to do. I mean, the sales team. Yeah. And he was not pushing enough. He was not being the leader that we needed that time to be. So that comes, that brought a lot of challenges and a question: what do we do with him? Right? We don't want to lose him.
So what did you do?
So we came out with a very sophisticated solution for the issue. So we didn't want to lose him. First of all, because we appreciated him very much, and I mean, he did a very good job for the company for many years. Clearly, he was not at that time the best person to keep doing that role, but we didn't want to lose him either to the competition or just to go somewhere else and lose some connections with customers. So we decided to put him in a different place, to not being the manager anymore for these people, and also not having the responsibility for selling to these clients. And we created a position for him that could leverage his abilities and skills and experience by keeping this relationship, network, support without having the responsibility to deal with it. In the end, it turned out to be a very good solution because he loved it. I mean, he really loved it. He was kind of doing his best work ever in many years because he was not with this huge responsibility of dealing with a huge budget of a wholesale team. He was not also on the lead in many of the negotiations with customers. And then he just was doing what he was the best doing, building network, training people, connecting one with another one. And so back then it worked out very nicely, and I think it was a good solution. But if we would have done it, then we were facing probably one of the worst of the nightmares when you have good people leaving because they cannot work with him anymore because they are basically not respecting him, and clients not buying from us.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's a really interesting story because it flags up a couple of thoughts in my own mind. I've got clients at the moment who've planning an event in a few weeks' time, and they are trying to overcome this particular challenge. Now, in their minds, it's in the early stages. They've got a team of people who are building good relationships with customers, but they worry that they're falling into this friend zone space, the space where the customer doesn't change their behavior because they don't need to, but they've become reliant on this friendship part of it. And it's a really interesting problem because as far as their team is concerned, they're doing the right thing. I need to have good relationships with my customers. And they're missing a big part of what I think that commercial relationship is, that relationship tension, which you describe. And I'm curious on your comments on that. The other thing I really like about this is lots of people, lots of businesses would have taken this guy and said, you're no longer good enough. You're no longer doing the job we want you to do. So we're going to fire you. That's the kind of capitalist, profit first scenario. But what you guys did was looked at where can he add value? Where is there space in the organization for him? And made a conscious choice of saying, well, this is the wrong job for him. It's not necessarily that we should sack him because he's got a lot of assets. He's in the wrong place for us. And if we move him somewhere else, he'll be much better, a much bigger asset for the organization. What's your comments or your thoughts on that?
Chris, you were talking about culture before, and I think you have referred to culture several times. And I think this has also a lot to do with the culture of the company back then. So we were in a culture of trying to. So we were working in a culture of trying to build this relationship with people and also caring about people. So we were not making a decision on someone to leave the company just because the performance was not the best. Mm-hmm. However, we also saw the need to move him. So having a culture in a company that cares about people, that doesn't mean that you cannot move them or you cannot even fire them when it's needed. It's just you need to really understand what is the issue going on and find a solution for it that could be good for him and good for the company. And I think that's what we did. But I also believe that in many other companies, they probably would just fire him because was not the guy that they needed back at that moment, despite him contributing a lot in the past. And I think that, to me, has a lot to do with the culture of the company and, of course, the style of leadership in those companies.
It also says a lot to the team around him about how you treat people and how much trust they put in the organization. And I find it curious that organizations ask their teams to trust them, do this, do that, work hard for us, put extra effort in, sacrifice family life at times, travel, all of these things for our organization. But on the flip side, when you don't fit, our response is that you've done a great job for us for the last 10 years. Now you don't fit, so you're gone. It's like, where's the quid pro quo there? Where's the balance? And what you did here was said, well, the balance is that you don't fit in this role right now, but that doesn't mean that we don't value what you've contributed, and we'll find some space for you. And that allows the rest of the team to almost take a sigh of relief and just go, this is a company that cares about its people, and so it is a good place to stay. And they lose that anxiety of getting something wrong or suddenly not the company changing or roles changing and then them being a victim of things. And I think that's an important part of team building and performance building, that sense of safety around the culture.
Absolutely. I mean, and also you need to be very honest with the person, right? Because in the end, you're moving them from one role that they believe they are doing a very good job. And then you need to explain them why they change. And you need to be honest. You cannot just, by the way, I need to move you here because I believe you are going to be performing better. But you also need to let them know why is the reason of the change. What has happened that probably we believe is not the best fit now for the role that he has been doing for the last 5 to 10 years, probably.
Yeah.
And that takes a very, very difficult conversation for sure. But it also kind of shows the kind of culture the person is working in, and the kind
Yeah.
of leadership that you want to the leadership mindset you want to create there.
So tell me a bit about that conversation. Did you have that conversation, or did someone else have that
I
conversation? And
did it. I took that myself.
yeah,
I really respected very much the person, and I didn't want him to take this the wrong way. So I remember very well because I was pretty young back then. I think I was I'm talking about probably 12 years ago, so I was still in my early 30s, and he was older than me, and he was always very kind and very polite. So I remember that he came to my office and I told him, I need to talk to you about some changes we need to do in the team. So the first thing he thought is, okay, we are firing people from his team, right?
yes,
It was not so uncommon from sales organizations. And I told him, and it's not the team, it's about you. And I, first of all, please don't think we are letting you go, because that's not the case. So let's start then. Let's start.
oh,
Let's start by telling you that your job at this moment is not at risk. I just want to let you know that I believe that what you have done so far is really good in that job, but I believe that the role has evolved in a different direction, and I don't think right now your skill set and the way you are performing or working is not in line with what we need there. However,
mhm.
I do see an option for you to keep doing what you do best and keep contributing to us in the company. And then I presented the option. I was expecting a big pushback from him.
Mm.
And it turned out that I saw his eyes kind of enlightening,
No,
like, oh my God, it sounds something that I was kind of looking for, because I also believe that maybe the job that we are doing now is not what I used to like anymore. Probably that was
yeah,
some way a complaint as well, right? Of
yeah,
probably he wanted to do things differently, but he really wanted to be more in the relationship part of the business, including training, talking to people, learning, teaching them how to do things because he had a lot of experience. Also going with these clients that he liked and appreciated very much without the need to close the deals with him. So,
mhm.
and again, I'm telling you a very successful story because I also have many others that went not that well, right? But this one, I think it's a very common example in sales organizations and in many organizations, not only in sales, when you have someone that has contributed a lot for your company, but probably they are no longer the right person.
And did he know? So when he came into your office, had you already had conversations about poor performance and problems, or was this all completely new for him at that moment?
I think we did have some conversations, but we should have had more in the past with him, to be very
Mm.
honest.
Okay.
This is something I learned from that experience, that despite me being very vocal in what I wanted him to do more, I was not as clear as I should have to tell him what would be the consequences of him not doing that.
Mm.
Right. So I think it didn't come up as a surprise to him that I was not super happy with the performance, but probably also was not as clear as I would have liked it to be.
And when you say consequences, would you have been as clear as to say your job is at risk? So performance is struggling and your job is at risk, or would you have framed it around we need to take steps to address this? How, looking back, what do you think you would have done differently?
I think that I was just describing about how the role, I mean, the role had evolved and him not
Mm.
evolving. And I think that gap that was being created already, I should have been more
Yeah.
clear and illustrated in a better way. So
Mm.
if you have been doing a job for many years and you have done it properly, even getting some recognition for it, for many people, that's the way to keep doing things. And
Mm.
why shouldn't they, right? I mean, they have been even recognized for that. So I
Mm.
think as leaders, sometimes we need to take the time and say, okay, if we already in as a part of the strategy, we have decided that this needs to change, we also need to bring the people into the same direction and explain them why their roles and what they have been doing in the past may also need to change in line with the new strategy that we are pretending. And I think that was missing back then. I didn't do it. I was very clear with the strategy for sure, but I was not really clear explaining how the new this new strategy or this new way of doing business needed to go with people also doing things differently.
Yeah.
Like,
How does it?
as granted.
Yeah. So how does it look every day when you arrive at work? What is it that I want you to do that's different than you did in the last 2 years? That's the question, right? So how does that look? And then we can have a conversation about the skills that you need to do that job differently and whether you match those skills or whether you can learn those skills. But it starts from how does your day look different now than it did previously, and the actual detail of that, because it's easy to say to people our strategy is going to be more, I don't know, we're going to have a more sales focused strategy and less relationship focused, for example, and people go, that's fine, but what does it mean? What if I'm going to go meet my customer? What's the difference between what we did yesterday? And that's where you're saying you hadn't really been clear enough for him so that he could visualize what he's not doing or what needs to be different.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the issue usually is when markets are evolving very, very, very fast and people don't really get the point soon enough. I mean, pharmaceuticals, it's a very, very good example. In pharma, I mean, the relationship between doctors, salespeople, and even pharma companies have been evolving massively in the last 20 years, right? From a very extremely close relationship, extremely, let's call it, massive support that pharmaceutical companies were giving to physicians 20, 25 years ago, to the more tight, only relationship based on interactions and communication between them. So that also removed many of the, let's call it, tools that salespeople used to have in pharma when they were going to visit doctors. So it turned out to be that they really needed to do the sale without the huge support of probably pharma companies offering another support to physicians or things like that. I'm not talking about anything not legal. I'm just talking about things that were common in the past that they are no more considered something either common or even now regulatory approved. Right?
Totally.
And many of these old school guys, probably you knew many of them also with your background and career.
Yeah.
Kind of it's really hard for people when they don't have those tools to offer to still do the sale and still build a relationship, because by mistake they build that relationship based on what they could give out of their normal job, right? What the company could offer them beyond the product and the good service from them. And I think that part also require a different skill set. I mean, people that need to realize that they need to do the sale and they need to do it with whatever they have in hand. It's a good product, a good service, a good explanation, everything you need.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a very good example in your book, Chris, regarding this product that you were trying to sell to this physician, which apparently was not as competitive as the other one, right?
Yeah.
So probably, I mean, in your example in the book, I mean, you came back when you have a new product, but I would also challenge that, right? Probably you still needed to do the effort of trying to sell the product without being the one that he wanted. I think to me, that is the challenge of a salesperson. And I'm not challenging you for sure. I'm just challenging you the mental process of saying, oh, he doesn't want this product. I need to wait 2 years until we have a new one. I would say, no, you need to sell this one, right?
And my problem at the time, when I look back on it now, was I was too narrow-minded of what was success. And when I look at it now, and if I go back to that time, I would have a much broader view of what was the barriers to his decision making, and how could I work together or work around him to make sure that things did progress. I mean, he wasn't the only person in that area that was buying those products, and but in my mind, he became this focal point, and it became, I could have thought very differently about how to overcome that barrier and how to work around it, and I didn't. And that was and it's right. You're right. It was that kind of fixed mindset that it's the product which is the solution, and I was too narrow-minded in the way that I thought about it. And I think it's just as you were telling the story about how times change. I was a junior young sales rep in the end of the 1990s. And I remember people who'd been around for 20 years previous, so they'd been working in the 1970s, telling me that when they used to go and see doctors and physicians, in the morning they would buy a packet of cigarettes, and they would take that packet of cigarettes to the meetings with the doctors, and they would give one to the customer, they would have one themselves. Their conversation lasted as long as it took them both to smoke their cigarette, and then they would move on to the next meeting. And during a day, they would smoke 20 cigarettes. That was the way that they used to do business. Now, that was never anything close to how I would do business. But that was, you talk about change.
I mean, if you look at it from the other side, I mean, again, going back to this example of the product, because I remember, getting people telling me, I mean, sales reps telling me, Jose, we cannot sell this until we get these advantage points for the product.
Yeah.
Because when we get that, then there will be no objections and no barriers to sell the product. Yeah. And then the question will always be, then when we would have this product, why would we need these salespeople, right? If the product alone doesn't need to be even promoted, then why do the company needs us?
Yeah. I remember an old sales manager of mine saying that if products was just about telling the features of the product, kind of just telling the features of the product, he said, I would send in dogs holding leaflets with the information on there, because he said everybody would see the dog. No, there would be no customer in the world who wouldn't be happy to have a meeting with a dog, particularly if it came in and then presented them with a piece of material. He said, I'm not paying you to just deliver information about the product. I'm paying you to engage with the customer, to listen, to understand, to influence, to connect, all of those great skills that we have around sales. And it's not just about delivering those bits of information. But you're right. It's the challenge of understanding the details of those roles and what is expected and how that changes over time is a huge challenge that we need to adapt to. And, we've seen lots of change in the last 10 years. And I'm actually curious in your observations that you go back pre-COVID, the idea of working remotely in many sales roles was frowned upon. You needed to be in a meeting room with your customer having those conversations. Now, you worked internationally. That wasn't always possible. What have you seen change over the last 5-6 years since you've been a lot more, forced to work remotely and then utilizing remote? Have you seen the need for customers and representatives to change their approach?
I mean, yes, definitely the quick answer will be yes, people need to adapt. But it's also true that during the pandemic, probably is not the good benchmark, right? Because people, they didn't have another option, right? So when people do any kind of analysis and studies and they say, yes, because we started remotely, because in the pandemic, there was no other option. Whether you do it you needed to do it like that or not do it at all. Mm-hmm. So that's not a good benchmark. In general, you need to bring things to a normal baseline when you can compare one process to the other one. I always run away of the remote, not remote discussions, right? Because I think this is a not black and white situation. I always believe in personal connections. I am a true believer in that. I believe that even more now when people are not really connected, not even sitting in front of the other, having the skill of connecting with people, it's going to be one of the biggest assets in the future for children, for anyone, because people, they don't even connect anymore. So when you talk about remote or how the environment is changing in the industry and in general, I believe we need to understand what is meant to be remote and what is meant to be a face-to-face interaction. And again, face-to-face, even a face-to-face remote, it's still to me face-to-face, right? If you are talking with someone rather than just sending something in a platform or an email or even the new technologies that allows you to put a AI avatar talking to your to your doctors and so on. So I think that this middle point where personal interactions still play a role is where I will kind of settle, right? I think that tools are just that, tools. We need to use tools for what they are meant for, to use them as a support to do what we are planning to do. But in the end, it's on us to try to achieve our objectives.
Interesting. Final thoughts, Jose. I'm curious to hear your reflections on the biggest lessons you've learned. You've just talked about it's about people, it's about connections. You've told the stories about having to give people bad news and to deal with people who are not adapting to the new world. You've also talked a lot about how you've learned to work in different cultures and to move to different markets. You reflect on all of that. What do you think is the biggest lessons that you've learned, or the advice that you would give to people who are starting out in a sales or commercial role today?
Yeah, I mean, two things. Number one, the openness to learn. Especially young people, I see that with my children now. They are in this era that they know everything, or they think that they know everything. And I'm not saying they don't. I mean, they do know way more than we used to know when we were their age. But the problem with that is that you start closing yourself to new learnings, and really open to listen from experience of others, and try to get these insights and learnings and use them for your own career development. So to me, that would be the number one. You need to be open, and it's really hard. It's very easy to say, but really, really hard for people to really be open, to really absorb this knowledge from others. And the second one, I think, the power of kindness. I mean, nowadays the success journey for everyone, it sometimes means just doing whatever you need to do just to get there without any consequences on where you're leaving behind. And I think that people that are kind enough in what they do, and they are really playing the kind card genuinely and working like that anywhere, they always will find open doors and people that will talk good about them and people willing to make deals with them, because kindness also comes with honesty. And I think when people are kind and honest, there's no skill better than that that could put them in a situation where they cannot achieve anything they want. And again, this is not against hard work. It's not against being ambitious. It's just keeping the kindness as the forefront of your personality.
I really like that, Jose. And there's a book that I read a few months ago which really made a mark on me. It's about status, and one of the things they explored was cultures around the world, and they went back to ancient cultures and cultures who are separate from the kind of main parts of society, and how they run themselves, how they operate. And there was a few things that they have as principles in common. And these are cultures that have grown up all around the world completely independently. And one of the things that these cultures have in common is care for their community. People who live in these groups and gain status in these groups and respect and leaderships and standing do so because they maintain, one of the rules that they maintain is that we support each other as a community. And that's not exactly as you described. It's not the same as I'm not ambitious or I'm not trying to do the best that I can for myself and for my family. But it is that I can't do that at the expense of the community that I live in and the people that are around me. And I think what you've just described really takes us back to how the fundamentals of society work and how you can build some really high performance groups just on those two things. So I think that's a brilliant piece of advice. I appreciate that a lot.
No, thank you. I mean, in the end, Chris, you know this better than me. When you look back at your career, of course, you will remember some of the good deals that you closed, but I think you will remember more the people that you work with, the people you have the opportunity to develop, or the people that help you out. Those are the good memories that you usually take with you. And not really the probably the biggest deal you ever close in your life. I mean, that comes always second.
Yeah. And I talk a lot about it, that the deal that you close will be the people that you did it with. That will be the memory. It will not be the deal. It will be, do you remember when we worked upon or what we did? That will be the experience that will stick with you. And I hope that there's a guy that you spoke with, 12 years ago, who looks back at that time, that conversation, as a positive moment in his career, not as something where he lost his job in sales and moved to a different part of the business, but as an opportunity to do something that he continued to love. And I think that is a great example of kindness in action, is that, give him bad news, but move him to somewhere where he's going to be happier.
Couldn't agree more.
Beautiful. Thanks for your time, Jose. I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your stories and your ideas today. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you very much, Chris. As always, a pleasure talking to you. And again, if people haven't got the book, Get the Elephant Out of the Room, they need to do it very, very fast.
Thanks for the plug. Appreciate that.
Thanks for listening to the Commercial Edge podcast. I'll be back soon with another episode. Join me then when we delve into more difficult conversations. See you next time.